Well, that's a sincere thanks to Senator Rob. And at this time, as we kick off our formal program, I'd like to invite our first group of panelists to the stage. So joining us this morning are Karen Grant. Karen's going to moderate the panel, Deborah Whale, Joe Dales, and John Lansink. And they're deliberating, why is ag innovation an important strategic investment?
Okay, are we, can you hear me back there? Yes, great. So good morning, everybody. My name is Karen Grant, and I'm delighted to be here today. And I think we're going to be addressing a very important topic, why ag innovation is an important strategic investment here in Canada. And so we have this incredible panel with us today, and I'm going to invite each of them to introduce themselves. And I'm going to kind of lead them on to explaining a little bit about themselves, because, of course, you're all very shy, I'm sure, individuals. So Joe, let's start with you. Co-founder and president of RH Accelerator. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Karen. Before I do, I think we should give a round of applause to somebody that won't ask for it herself, but Katie and the Grand River Ag Society for stepping up, hosting this, event, which is kind of new to us because we haven't been together for 2 years. So thank you, Katie, and thank you to their board. A number of them are here. Garth, Deb, of course, and the other ones that are here. Make sure you have a chance to thank all them. So, my background. I've been in agriculture, I guess, my whole life, and had a great career. First part of my career working for a lot of the big life science companies, where I've got some friends that I've worked with over the years in the room here as well. And then quite a few years ago, thought I was an entrepreneur, and I got a ton of support from people in this room. I had some great mentors like Rob Hannum's dad, he's in the room. Peter Hannum, I see Jordan Jokius is here. Ginty Jokius was one of the early investors in what became agcareersandfarms.com. And John Lansink's here, and his partner, Mike Perovich, was one of our early angel investors. So going through my career, we got agcareersandfarms.com up and running. A couple of years ago, it was our 20th year in business. The business was doing really quite well. And I wanted to work with some other people. My friend Brian Foster, who's unfortunately not with us today, had just sold his company to Constellation, had a great exit. He had built a company called Innosoft from start to really nice traction, had a great exit to Constellation. He had some capital, he wanted to work on some projects, had some other friends that had some projects that they wanted to work on. Nevin McDougall's here, and we've been working together the last 3 or 4 years, and Brian Cram. And so we formed RH Accelerator basically to invest and support early stage entrepreneurs, because we got a lot of help, and it's tough enough when you're out there all by yourself trying to raise money, get customers, build a company. And so that's kind of what we do at RH. We try to invest early ahead of some of the companies like Emertech and Ag Capital Canada, help the organizations grow. We've done, I think we have about 30 companies that we've invested in, and our time, our money, all the love we can give those early stage founders. I particularly like the agri-food space. I think it's very dynamic and there's a lot of opportunity there. So that's a little bit about myself. We try to encourage our founders to know their why, the Simon Sinek whys. And I've been blessed to work in agriculture, and I like bringing innovation to farmers, helping them save time, save money, make money. And I feel like we're feeding the world in a small way. So pretty easy to stay motivated and have a lot of fun with it. And I'm really delighted to be here and could talk about this all day. So on to the other panel members.
Thank you for that. Deborah, Deborah Whale. I think you're known by everybody in this room. My guest, Grand River Agricultural Society Board Director, first Vice President and Chair of the Philanthropic and Impact Investing Committee. So that's quite a bit. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got here?
Well, over many years, I have sat on several very strategic agriculture innovation boards, and those consist of things like the Agriculture Research Institute of Ontario, the Alberta Poultry Research Council, the Vaccine and Infectious Disease Organization in Saskatoon, the Poultry Industry Council, and now the Grand River Agricultural Society as the chair of the investment committee. I've raised a lot of money for ag research along the way, and frankly, there have been obstacles occasionally in seeing that money spent well. I own a dairy, cash crop, and bioenergy farm, and we have done our best over the years to keep on top of new ag tech. But all of those organizations and the farm that I mentioned, I think, have a common knowledge that agriculture in Canada is vital to the health, wealth, and competitiveness of this nation. And we have watched over the last century the massive productivity gains in agriculture thanks to research that's been done in plant and animal genetics, in weed and disease control, better equipment and better management skills. So now, inevitably, when the production has done so well, we are now looking at the environmental impacts, and we're starting to see amazing innovations in biofuels, biochemicals, biosolvents, et cetera, all from renewable plant material. We see precision farming, plant genetics that have made plants more cold and drought resistant, disease and insect resistant, and genetically superior animals that create more product on less input. So I believe these are all examples of the importance of past and ongoing innovation in agriculture, and that we must target strategic goals. So I'll leave it at that, but I intend to speak more about that later.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Deborah. John Lansink, General Partner of Ag Capital Canada. What brought you here today, and can you tell us also a little bit about Ag Capital Canada's relationship with GRAS?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Katie, for inviting me. And yeah, I just want to first start to say, you know, I'm relatively new to this sort of investment ecosystem, and I'm definitely humbled to be on the stage with the likes of Joe and Deb here. You know, my background was I grew up as a hog farmer outside of London, Ontario. So my father started a company called Premium Pork. It was a startup. We went from about 1,250 sows to about 40,000 sows right across Canada. We were shipping about 1 million piglets a year to the US and finishing them in Iowa. And I just really loved that industry. I got fully immersed in it. I did every aspect of that farm. I did everything from working in the nursery barns to working in the sow units. I spent 2 summers in Iowa doing everything from working in the actual finishing barns to working in the packing plants. Every single aspect of the packing plant I actually worked in. And I just got fully immersed in that industry. And I just love the agricultural sector for the community, for the sector in general, I'll say. Unfortunately, I graduated from Guelph in 2003, and unfortunately it didn't work out so well for our family business. We grew quite large, quite quickly. And yeah, we had to exit that. And it had a very big impression on myself, having seen that company grow from a startup to what it was, to then back down again. And I sort of vowed to myself that I would find ways to, first of all, do some, you know, internal research and digging into why that happened, but also make sure that I could not make those same mistakes going forward. I ended up working for a company after that called General Dynamics in London, Ontario. Completely different industry altogether. It was in the defense sector. We made light armored vehicles for various militaries around the world. But I moved from the finance department to the business strategy and business development side. And I focused on there because I wanted to see what it would take to really change a company and grow it. Their ambition was to grow that company quite large, quite quickly. And I spent a lot of time developing a 5-year, 10-year strat plan, really understanding the ins and outs of taking something that was relatively small and growing it very quickly, very big, very quickly. And they were a great company. They put me through to school, so I ended up getting my master's at Queen's. I got my accounting designation. But ultimately, I wanted to get back into the agricultural sector and sort of take my learnings in that and apply it to my own company. So I ended up buying a company, a part of a company, I should say, in Tillsonburg, Ontario. It was called Future Transfer. We spun off a division called Blue Star. What we did with Blue Star is we formulated, manufactured, and shipped out various crop protection products. So our customers were Syngenta, Dow, DuPont, BASF, I guess, companies like that, and took over that business and grew it quite big, quite quickly over the next 5 years when I purchased it. We expanded into Winnipeg and ultimately had a fairly successful exit in 2015 to Univar Corporation. They ended up buying out the company. So with that success, I wanted to find ways to make sure that we could give back to the sector itself. So I was talking to a bunch of colleagues of mine and ran across John DePutter in London, and he said, we should actually start our own private equity business. And I kind of said, well, that's kind of, stupid. You can't just start a venture capital private equity. And he said, no, we can do this. You just got to, put your mind to it. And got connected to 2 individuals in London and they started a company called London, Ontario Private Equity. So that company was started by Glenn Jones and Denis Lemieux, right? And it was a small fund, but they were, Glenn was a lawyer with Miller Thompson, and Denis worked for Ernst & Young, both in the M&A side. They essentially gave me their playbook of how to start this, and it saved us a ton of time, and I took that playbook and just kind of ran with it. Decided that, if we're going to start a small venture capital, we should also invest our own money. So the 5 GPs, which were myself, John, Jay Bradshaw came on. So Jay was the president of Syngenta Canada, and he was the first guy I called because he announced his retirement about 2 to 3 years ago, and I knew his reach, and his reputation within the Canadian ag sector was second to none, I would say. So I called Jay right away. Mike Perovich, who was my business partner in Future Transfer. And then we wanted to make sure that we were Canada-wide. So we reached out to a few people out west and ended out getting a hold of Greg and Druco. And Greg owned about 21, I think, retail outlets across Western Canada. I think it was the largest independent egg retailer in Canada. He sold his egg retailer to Nutrien, I think 3 years ago now. So he ended up coming on as well. So we invested $4 million of our own money into it. And our relationship with Grand River Egg Society is because they were one of my first phone calls to see if they would join as a limited partner investor in our fund. And they were, I would say, risky enough, and they took the leap with us since we were a new fund, but they actually came on board, and they were our first 2 units that we ended up getting an LP investor was a Grand River Egg Society. So they were really the catalyst for us getting going. After that, we got Farm Credit Canada came on board, and they actually are about half our fund size. They put in about $12.5 million. And then, we raised money from strictly, I would say, farmers or agricultural professionals right across Canada who signed up for our fund. We wanted to make sure that our limited partners had a background in the agricultural sector, that they understood this sector, because the investments that we're making in this sector obviously are unique from the typical investments that startups would make in terms of the typical sort of Silicon Valley type, right? So having LP investors who understand this industry, who appreciate the cycles of it and so on was definitely crucial for us. So got the fund going.
Ask, what's
please.
the total amount?
So
that you've raised so
our
far?
assets under management is $26.25 million. Is what we close it off.
Great.
So again, a relatively small fund, but we wanted to make sure that we got our feet wet, got this fund up and running, that we proved the concept, and so far so good. We've made 6 investments so far. We're hoping to make 1 more within another couple months here. 2 of the companies are here, Farm Health Guardian and Dairy with OMID, so really pleased with those, and so far so good.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay. Deborah, I'm going to come back to you and maybe ask you to explain, flesh out a little bit what GRAS is doing with its impact investing strategy.
Well, I would start off by saying I'm sure there's nobody in this room, or certainly very few people, that need to be convinced that agriculture is the bedrock of any civilization, and the need to continue doing the research and adoption of innovation that we've done so far. But there are many investors out there who don't have a clue what ag technology is, or that ag tech equals green tech. And I think that we need to realize that what we're doing here in this room requires motivated and well-funded inventors. It requires knowledgeable investors, and it requires farmers who adopt leading-edge technology. And farmers, by the way, who represent now 1.5% of the population, we really need to keep them motivated. So those are the big picture reasons why Grand River Agricultural Society sees agriculture as a very strategic investment, and why GRAS, in its small way, is involved in doing what we can to encourage and support a very vital industry. We want to support those who have the education and the foresight and the risk taking to actually invest in agriculture and innovate in agriculture. And that's why today is a start for us to bring investors and innovators together to grow the Canadian industry and to keep it competitive. And that's why GRAS looks to fund research that gives Canadian producers a competitive edge. And that, again, I'm saying, is a key strategic goal for the Grand River Agricultural Society.
Great, thank you. Segueing off of that, Joe, you and I have both been involved in the startup community for, I'm going to say, decades. I may have a decade over you, but and so you described some of your past success. You talked about bringing your partners together, but maybe you could talk a bit more about RH Accelerator, and we know that when you start up a company, it's really tough. It's hard starting up a company from scratch. Many of the innovators, inventors don't actually know, they're missing some aspects of building a business. Maybe they don't know accounting, maybe they don't know bookkeeping, they don't know cash flow, or they're very technical, and so they don't know business and marketing and sales. So there are gaps. And maybe you can tell us how RH handles that, helps with that.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, the ecosystem in agriculture and ag tech, I think, is very underdeveloped and very immature for the scale and scope of agriculture. And it's only been maybe the last 4 or 5 years, and John's been at the forefront of it, and Sean's here from Saskatchewan at the forefront of it. People like TELUS, Amertech, which is Connexus and Libro, and some of the other credit unions. FTC stepped up in a big way. We're going to hear from Rebecca in a little bit. We're only 3 or 4 years old, and so we saw all this wonderful opportunity for innovation, be it robotics, biotech, software, data, all these things. But huge gap from young founder, Coles here. So young founder coming out of the University of Waterloo, bright little founding gang, to making it a commercial company and a great investment. And so we decided we're going to try to plug in really early stage, support the founders when they're in that really early stage, invest a small amount of money with a large number of companies. We're fortunate to meet Brian Cram, who's at the back of the room there. I encourage you to meet Brian. He helped us pull together with my partner Brian 519 Growth Fund, where we're going to put small amounts into a large number of companies and just bring them along. So the money is important, but we try to wrap around them with our experience. Founders kind of for founders, and depending on what they need, we'll kind of guide them. It might be looking at a term sheet one day, it might be looking at a shareholder agreement the next day, it could be working on trying to get that first, big customer, so you can get proof of concept with your new software and so on. In teleculture, I'm going to pick on Cole. He's going to speak a little bit later. We met Cole 4 years ago. Students from the University of Waterloo, I think we met them at one of our precision ag conferences. Really liked them. They were young. They were just kind of playing with an idea. We watched them for a couple years. Then we brought them into RHA, worked with them, helped them get some funding. GRAS was able to put some money into them as well. And then, he's going to tell the rest of the story later on. They've gotten to the next stage with seed financing. So, and we expect them to grow as they get more and more resources going forward. So if we can replicate that model 100 more times over the next few years, and some of them work, we'll have some really great stories and great companies a few years down the road. So we're maybe less of an accelerator with a programmatic, today it's Tuesday, we're going to talk to you about marketing. We really adopt the founder and say, all right, what is it you need? And how can we help you with our specialized knowledge? Because we've been there. We've had to negotiate deals. We've had to ask for love money from friends and family, which until you've actually done it, when you have to ask your Uncle Don for money, or Mike Perovich for $25,000 when, hey, we're starting an internet company. Farmers didn't have computers, there was no internet. But I think what we saw, and Mike, to his credit, was investing in the founders, which is what we do, because they'll figure it out. We're investing in people. It's mostly about human resources, especially at that young age. And so we're really trying to unlock the human resource potential of our great young founders. So we need to just do as a group, bring them forward, and we'll create some wealth, and we'll help our farmers be more productive as Deb wants to.
So I'm going to mix this up a little bit. We, of course, talked about the questions I was going to be asking, and I'm feeling compelled to kind of move right into this whole question of agriculture and the maturity of that sector as an investment opportunity. So in mining in Canada, we have cradle to grave funding. We have money for the first hole that's dropped into the ground, all the way up to IPO and robust public markets for mining. And so, John, I'm going to ask you to kind of lead this part of the conversation. We've heard that the ag sector is viewed as being kind of nascent. Maybe it's been on the radar screen for investors for the last 4 years or so, and even that's early. Mm-hmm. But talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing across Canada and the opportunities that may or may not be there for the ag sector.
Sure. So, we're obviously limited just based on our industry in general, meaning, we are something that requires a certain amount of time. We have scalability, I'll say issues or realities is maybe better to say, that deals with our industry. And I think that's something in mining, for example, you were mentioning that, Karen, is, that's been around for a very long period of time and so on. That has, a whole ecosystem that's been there. But what people pivot to is then, all right, then they go to Silicon Valley and they say, well, here's all this startup, this whole ecosystem, they get a lot of capital, they can scale it quickly and so on. And we have the ag sector that's kind of in the middle here, I would say, right? That's sort of lost in it. And I would say, what's really required is just more capital, to be honest with you, and patience, right? We have to appreciate that this isn't an investment that can be scaled pretty much tomorrow, or someone on a laptop can just start a company tomorrow and do. This requires growth cycles. It requires, everything from the animal side of it with growing, so on. It's just a different beast on its own. So to compare it to that and to say that, it can scale as quickly as those type companies is just completely wrong.
So you're not going to build something for 4 years and do a flip.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. So we need to be a little bit more patient on it, I would say, and some more capital. But what I am seeing is that is happening right now. So just the other day, we were talking about this too, is Power Corp ended up buying a small private a company, I should say, and they are now going to stand up a whole agri-food private equity company, which is fantastic for our industry. It gives that exit type situation for a lot of the companies that we invest in. We have RH Accelerator that's starting, obviously. We have Connexus through their program and so on. I'm seeing TELUS with that side of it. There is an entire ecosystem in Canada that is being built up and so on. So
But it's thin right now,
it,
right?
it's thin, but it's getting there.
starting.
It's getting there, right?
Yeah.
And we need to continue to develop that. So what we need to do is start that pipeline, and I'm starting to see that more and more happening, right? So if we don't have a pipeline of companies that we can invest in, that we can continue to mature and grow, you know, from the Joe Dales and the Arch Accelerator and the so on, to then pass it off to the Ag Capital Canada, to then pass it off to the Power Corps, right, to then go public.
Right.
That's what we need. And we
Yes.
are starting to see that more and more with a lot of partnerships, syndicate investments that Ag Capital is making. Yeah, it's definitely getting there, I'd say.
Good. Well, then, now I get to do the scramble here, because, there are a lot of points here. If we're starting to build that complete life cycle, which is great, and it is early days,
Yeah.
we've got a couple of things that I'm throwing it out to everybody. So what does the company pipeline look like in the ecosystem? And so while we're focused here in Ontario, maybe even southwestern Ontario, or southern Ontario rather, I think we need to take a bit of a broader view. So that's one question. I'm going to throw all three out. Are we lacking companies to fund, or are we lacking dollars to invest? That's the second question that I'd like us to talk about. And then, you know, is there competition for the same deals in this space? Or is it truly just picking one by one, or are there just not enough players in the ecosystem to create a competitive environment for a good quality deal? So let's start at the top, and anybody can wade in and answer. What does the company pipeline look like in this space?
Yeah, I can go first, I guess. I'm hopeful that we can encourage a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship. I see what's going on in Waterloo as a template, where University of Waterloo has spun out a bunch of great companies, and so everybody at the University of Waterloo wants to start the next. They don't even talk about BlackBerry anymore. It's about OpenText and Shopify and all those other great success stories. And so they've developed a really wonderful culture there, that there's a lot of interaction. Agriculture, you know, Deb alluded to it, there's 1.5% are farm kids anymore. So if we expect that to be our only source of innovation in agriculture, you know, we're not going to have a pipeline. Mm-hmm. So we need to bring in talent from robotics, biotech. Maybe they're not from a farm, but you know, we need to encourage them to learn about the agriculture space, and then wrap people that do know around those brilliant, you know, software developers, scientists, technology folks. And if we do a good job of that, we'll have a great funnel in Canada, just because we are, you know, a great agricultural power in the world. Mm-hmm. So, but if we don't focus on those early stage, you know, encourage them, you know, in Canada, failure is kind of a bad thing, and you know, we need more activity, I think, on that early stage, so that there is a good pipeline through. I believe it's there. I believe we can compete, and I think we can be, you know, we can flow those companies through to the next round of investment.
Like I would say,
But I think it comes down to the question: are we lacking companies, or are we lacking dollars, or both?
That's difficult. I would say that, you know, we've all heard of this brain drain in Canada with our doctors and so on and so forth. And when it comes to startup community, I would say for a very long period of time, and even when I graduated from Guelph and so on, if you started a business and needed the seed capital, what was your first reaction to go? Is not to look in Canada, it's to go somewhere else. We need to change that, right? And I think we are. I honestly think we are. So it's hard to say, do we have enough companies? Well, the metrics are probably hard to find, because they were all scooped and brought down to the States or somewhere else, because that's where the investment dollars were. And what GRAS is doing, what Joe's doing, what 519's doing, what Connexus is doing, and what, through those companies and then follow on to Ag Capital is doing. We're trying to make sure that we keep it here. We have amazing talent here. I truly believe we have a ton of companies here and a ton of amazing talent. We just need to continue to grow it and harvest it and, nurture it and so on. And that's what we're trying to do. So what I'm hoping is that we will start to change that, and we'll start to see a lot more companies that were saying, hey, I didn't realize that was a Canadian company, or, keep that investment dollars in here, keep it growing in here, and so on. So that's what I'm hoping we can do.
Deborah?
I wonder too if we're making a mistake in looking at one-offs. So I wonder what the major strategic plan is for Canada. And just, I've been thinking about this, and I'd just like to give you an example, because I think given the size of Canada and the sophistication of some of our main industries, it seems to me the time is right for using bioproducts from major Canadian industries and turning them into value-added products. Now, I know this isn't new thinking. We're watching it happen, but I'm not sure at what scale it's happening. But I do think there are at least 2 companies in the room today that are doing this. BioEnterprise is here, and it is supporting Saltec Global, which is recovering micronized elemental sulfur from the gas and oil industry. They're then using that to create fertilizer, and therefore, I presume, alleviate our dependence on synthetic fertilizers and the international supply of those. Also, we have Dairy Distillery here, who's using a waste product from the dairy industry, namely milk permeate, to make alcohol and hand sanitizers. And I think those are smart business ideas. I think we need more research into the bioproducts marketplace, and I would like to see something like that as a key strategic goal for Canada.
And then I would say, by adding on to that, if we can foster these companies and grow them and they become successful, that'll then encourage more investment dollars into the research side. So, it will take time. We appreciate that. None of these investments are short-term. Anyone who's in this space understands that these are long-term investments. This isn't a 3-year and you're out. This is a 7 to 10-year investment play, and we just need to stick to it. And I think that it'll come. Yeah.
And I think 7 to 10 years is even optimistic, frankly.
In a
because
lot
to
of
grow,
times, yep, that's
it depends
fair
on what
enough.
you're trying to accomplish. Do you want a foundation business, or an exit, or world domination? Because there's the opportunity that Canadian technology
world domination, obviously.
World domination, I think so. Yeah. And then, so I think what I'm hearing is that there's not a lot of competition for the same deals.
So that's an interesting thing to say. I would say that, in terms of I would say what I've liked seeing, I would say, and seems to be developing is sort of the syndicate investment play, where we can bring in different other venture capitals, other investment entities, and so on,
And
to then
lower
syndicate
risk.
with you and invest in the companies. Because it only benefits companies that you're investing in to have those syndicates come into play, right?
Yes.
Ag Capital Canada might have some expertise, but Joe will have some other expertise, and Connexus will have some other expertise, and TELUS Ag might have other expertise. And by bringing those together, you just make the companies that they're investing in better. I know it's a little bit more, more sticky, I'll say. It takes more time. Who's going to lead it? How's the term sheet going to be put together? What does the investment look like, and so on? What are the pressures? There's so many different things that make it complicated, but it's so, it's such a benefit to the founders to bring that syndicate together. So is there competition? Yes, but I would say that it's more of a friendly competition. I'm not calling Sean, for example, and saying, I'm arguing with him over this investment. It's more, how can we work together with it? Some of them he takes, and I say, no, it's just not right for Ag Capital, and I'm sure it's the same with us, right? Some of them I take, and he says it's not good. But it's more of, we all want to see this ecosystem develop. It's only to our benefit, right? The more success there is in it, the better we can start, Ag Capital Fund 2, the better Sean can do in his fund. It just benefits all of us, so, yeah.
So Joe and I were on a call last week before, with the Ontario Founders Network, which is an organization put together by tech transfer offices of universities across Southern Ontario. And we saw 7 technology opportunities being presented by the researchers, which was great. Each of them was looking for an entrepreneur to help commercialize the technology, form a company, and take it to market. Of those 7, 1 was a new pesticide screening technology called Pexel Technology out of U of T that will deliver new and safe pesticide leads and targets to the agriculture business. And they are looking for an entrepreneur, ideally with experience to successfully build a company around this technology. So we've talked about money, we've talked about deal flow. Are there enough startup entrepreneurs in Canada with ag tech experience to help these technologies commercialize? Because that's, if there are 3 legs to this stool, is that the 3rd leg? Joe, you're nodding, and I think, what do you think? Do we have enough entrepreneurs with the 1.5%? This is becoming a theme here. Are there enough experienced entrepreneurs out there to help an ag tech opportunity grow?
You know, I think it's all about the human resource. You know, this will be successful in 5, 10, 20 years. We're planting oak trees, and it takes a long time to do that. So I think it does boil down to the human resources issue. There's never enough talent. I think every company I work with right now, the number 1 issue is talent. Getting the right people in the right roles, trained, motivated, incented, everything. So the answer is we have a good base. Can we and should we do better and invest more in those human resources? I believe we should. I think there's more and more programs out there that are developing. It's never been easier to bring people along. But it's agriculture is such an interesting niche, and I throw it out to somebody like Cole to talk a little bit about his experience onboarding into the sector, and then I think we have Rob Hannum speaking later. You know, Rob was brought up on a farm, and you know, what can we do to attract more Coles into the industry from these other places? Because I do believe it's an issue. So
Okay.
we have a good base, but we need to do better.
The question is, where do you get them? So and again, I'll throw it open to the other panelists if you've
there's
got any
actually-
thoughts about that. We've got at least 2 people that started their lives on a farm. How do you move from being the farmer to being a agriculture related business leader? How does that happen?
I don't even know if that's a fair question because I think that 1.5 is busy doing what they're doing.
Right.
Adapting to new technologies and new social demands, to put it mildly. And I think that when anybody is doing agriculture research on behalf of the ag sector, they have to look at farmers. Is your research increasing their efficiency? Is it decreasing their costs? Is it decreasing their need for labor? And are they going to get a fair return for the risk they've taken to innovate? Those are really important questions. And,
Agreed.
And I don't
Maybe the
know
question
where more
is,
time is going to come.
who's looking at that? Who's
Well,
analyzing that?
Good question,
Thank you.
because I think the big picture is not being looked at. And we look at our universities, and over the last century, to be fair, a lot of public money has gone into ag research. There's no doubt about it. Public money and good extension work, not so much anymore. And that's why there is a need for more private investment, and a need, I think, to communicate way more effectively with urban-based investors as to what they're missing here.
What I do, and maybe this is a tip for everybody here, what I do is when I come across a good young person that I think might have a bit of an entrepreneurial spark, I try to keep connected with them. So I see Curtis is over here, you know, University of Waterloo farm kid, mechatronics or something? Exactly. Yeah, so met him somewhere, made sure he was invited to come to this today, right? Jason, you're at the back of the room, master's mechatronics, met him somewhere, threw him in with Chuck. All of a sudden, you know, Haggerty Ag Robotics has some talent in there, and Chuck's, you know, training that next new one. So, you know, I'd encourage all you folks out there, when you come across that smart farm kid, and you'll come across them because you're talking to the parents, and John Geisbers was telling me, oh, my daughter's working for Apple. Ching, that goes into my database. Maybe someday she'll be an entrepreneur and we can go and grab her up.
This is your database?
You know, I had never met John.
Yeah.
I had never met John. But if I do it and everybody else does it times 100,
Agreed.
we have some power here. I'd never met John before, but Herman was one of Farms.com's early customers. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he was a great mentor and a business person that took good care of us. So, you know, when I met John the first time, it's like, oh, you're Herman's son. Oh, wow, great. I'm glad you're back in the industry. So we need to draw them in and recruit them like we're recruiting our staff and nurture them.
Yeah. Well, there's no question within the innovation ecosystem in Ontario, the focus has not been on ag tech.
No.
And again, our provincial government has been spending millions and millions in regional innovation centers and all the programs that are being run there. And I think ag tech's been given,
Zero.
I wasn't going to say that, but less, definitely less. So maybe what we need to do is see if there could be a little more interest applied to that area, not be quite so hyper-focused on technology. Well, technology innovation is such a imperfect brush, right? What does that actually mean? Because it can apply to agricultural opportunities. I've certainly seen a lot. But again, they're just mixed in, blended in with everybody else. So, John, you've got a national viewpoint. Maybe you can talk about how other parts of the country are dealing with this.
Well, I do think that it's a bit of perception versus reality, right? And that's our industry faces that all the time, especially in the ag chem side. But, you know, like people look at this industry and say, you know, do I really want to spend my career in it? And there's, you know, Apple, for example, it's sexier, I'll say, to go work for Apple or something, but depends on what you consider sexy. I consider having, you know, a nice place, you know, with a nice family and driving 2 minutes to my office and, you know, getting the same wage, having the same opportunities, having these really interesting jobs that you can be, you know, in my mind, that's better than, you know, fighting traffic in downtown LA or San Francisco or downtown Toronto for 2 hours, or, you know, it's all these things that I think that our industry continues to fight, but I do think it is starting to change. You know, looking at it from an opportunity standpoint, I would say, you know, the growth and technology improvements that this industry will undergo in the next 20 years is going to be quite amazing. So if you really want to be in an amazing industry that's going to have that change, that you're going to be able to live in these amazing places and see these amazing people and see these big leaps and bounds in technology, I think this is the industry to be in by far. And again, it just depends on how you look at it. And I just think that we just need to change how we look at it. One specific, you know, thing is, you know, there is a company in Calgary, I think it was a spin-off of AVAC, which is called Carrot Ventures.
Yes.
And they do exactly what you're suggesting, is they find these good businesses and they try to then go out and get a CEO and put them into these businesses.
They wrap the management team
They wrap the
around
management team together.
And their
you know,
experience.
Exactly. But like Joe was saying, like when we look at a company, it's opportunity, yes, you know, what is the actual business itself? Is it novel? That's all good. But then immediately it goes, who's the founder? Like, if it was Dairy Distillery and if Omid wasn't there, we would have been out in a heartbeat. With Farm Health Guardian, we actually said, Rob Hannum, you got to come in and, you know, be the leader in this business, because his background, his expertise, you know, what he can bring to the, you know, him and Tim combined is so much better. So, you know, it's something that you have to look at with these founders and so on. And Cole's, you know, exact same. What a great young founder that they found. But so how do you bring them in? I think it's a matter of us changing the perception of it, which will take time, like everything else we're doing here. But I think these events start, you know, really help it. So, yeah.
I agree. I think clearly we need more of these types of events to raise the awareness of the opportunities to be found in the ag sector. And Deborah and I had the conversation about the misconceptions that are out there with the urban investors and the opportunities to be realized in agriculture. We're going to be wrapping up this session. We're almost done. And Deborah, I'm actually going to hand the floor over to you, if you will. there are preconceptions about ag. How do we change those preconceptions? And how do we get these urban investors to pay attention to this sector and to start to value the importance of it? And I'll just throw one last thing, and this is just a personal observation. I think the last 2 years over the pandemic, many of us have become a lot more aware of the dependencies that we've had with imports, imported food, the security of our supply chain, the dependence we have on logistics from outside of the country. Is this a good time for us to maybe draw attention to the integrity of our own resources versus our dependence on foreign imports?
I'd
Deborah?
almost flip that the other way. I think with the war in Russia and the disruption in the Ukraine, Canada's going to have to step up and really feed the world even more.
Like we used to?
Well, it just we're going to be called upon to, ship more wheat to countries that we haven't the last few years. So I think in this crazy world, the Russians going into Ukraine is extremely disruptive, and so I think the next 2 or 3 or 4 years are going to be very robust for the crop side of Canadian agriculture, which is a big chunk of it. And I think we're going to have good prices. The inputs are going to go up in lockstep with that, but it's going to be as long as there's moisture in Western Canada, Canadian agriculture is going to be in a pretty good spot. So taking care of that opportunity.
That is an issue, as long as there's moisture in Western Canada. I think that we don't maybe realize in this country that Canada is one of 8 countries, only 8 countries in the world that provide most of the food exports. So there's Brazil, Argentina, the US, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Thailand, India. That's more than 60% of all of the food that's exported in the world. And we are in a northern climate, and now we are being challenged by climatic extremes in Canada. So we sit on a very tenuous food base here, and anything we can do in this country in terms of innovation and new ag technology to secure not just our food supply, but the global food supply, the better we're going to be. And we better, all of those urban investors out there who have lots to eat and have not made the connection between that lots to eat, ag tech, and the adoption of that innovation by Canadian farmers is making a big mistake. We need to get their money involved before it's too late.
Wow. So how are we going to do that?
Well,
Grow some great companies.
I wonder if, yes, grow some great companies. You're absolutely right. And I hope that most of you have had the opportunity to read a report that was done very recently for CAPI, the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute. And the report was called Agri-Food Productivity and Trade, and it is a barnstormer perspective, as far as I'm concerned, done by the infamous, famous Al Muscle, Ted Billy, Douglas Headley. And that report contends that the current Canadian agri-food policy, which governs virtually everything we're talking about in this room, concentrates on climate change, yes, on labor issues, yes, a retail code of conduct, and policy measures to address certain threats that are out there like African swine fever. But the report indicates that key elements of innovation, trade, and marketing were just seen as requiring marginal changes. Well, really, is that right? So we're looking at climate perils out there. We're looking at some serious weaponized agri-food policies on the part of big countries like China and the USA. Those are global trade tactics which regularly hurt Canadian farmers and food processors, and those threats are borne unequally by those frontline agri-food industries. And we here in Canada have to look at our research, as far as I'm concerned, as building strategic leverage. How will our scientists, innovators help in this regard? It's going to be difficult when the government apparently has not seen the need for increased innovation, trade, and marketing. So as a farmer, I just want to close my part of this by saying I need you to keep me competitive. I need you to lower the GHG intensity of food production. I need you to increase the use of bioproducts from Canadian energy. Farmers have stepped up to the plate in terms of adoption of all of your great new technologies. But we, as farmers, have to do this more, and we have to do it at a faster pace. Investors need to be educated as to the strategic value of ag tech. And clearly all of us in this room have a lot of exciting and strategic work to do, so let's get at it. Thanks for being here.
I think you've given us a lot to think about, all three of you, and thank you very much. I hope everyone in the audience will help us spread the word that ag tech and ag food opportunities are emerging growth opportunities that investors should be paying close attention to. We need to bring more funds to the table to support this growing innovation, or the growing innovation in this sector. So once again, please join me in thanking Deborah, Joe, and John for sharing your expertise and experience with us today. And thanks to our audience and here and online, because we in fact are streaming online, for joining us for this panel on why ag innovation is an important strategic investment. So thank you very much. Katie, back over to you, and she'll let us know what's next at the SPARK Symposium.
Well, the next and most important thing is a small thank you gift for each of you. And there's a theme throughout the day, and obviously everybody heard a lot. Omeda is going to share his story about Dairy Distillery later. So as you exit to your stage left, please grab a Dairy Distillery gift pack from Dorothy for joining us here this morning.
Oh, wow.
So, and a big thank you to Karen. When we asked Karen to moderate this panel, she's like, I am not an expert in this field, and I have decades of experience in investment and growing companies and tech, but am I inauthentic because this is not my space? And that is exactly the type of person that should be here leading these charges and these conversations today. So again, Karen, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So as these guys exit the table, we're going to take a super short commercial break, give you an opportunity to check any type of technology. The last hour has flown by. But for those of you who don't want to go far, our commercial breaks are actually an opportunity for us to showcase some of the great founders and some of the great work that's happening in the Canadian ag-tech eco-space. We couldn't have everybody here to speak today, so we have a series of short videos that will be shared, but please feel free to mingle, chat, conversate all during that time. But for now, we'll start off with our first one, so thank you.